So before Alana, the professional, takes over and tells you everything you need to know, okay, we're starting our class, people. Then I want to show you all the work I did trying to become a professional, which I never did get to do that. But I'm going to show you what I did, because I worked hard at it for like a whole week or two before I decided I'm never going to get it. So,
and we learned how to use the new machine.
Okay, so the point is the library got a brand new big electric, go big cutter. It's electric. You cannot take it out of the library as you can check out the little ones, the portable ones that they checked out before. So they got this new big one so you could bring your fabric to the library and cut it out at the library. It's stored in that cabinet, but you have to ask permission to use it. I mean, just say, I would like to use the go cutter. We will help you get it out, help you plug it in, and help you do it. So I'll tell you all the dumb things I did. The first time I came, I just brought a tub of fabric, and I thought, I'll just go run it through and make some flying geese. I want to make some flying geese. Well, that sounds easy, and I can do that. So I brought this tub of solids, and we just went through as fast as we could, and we told me, she's helping, Kaylene helped me. So we went through, and I took them all home, and I go, well, okay. And there was a lot of waste, because I hadn't done it right, I'll tell you why. And then I took it home, and I kind of had to sort out, and then I didn't know how many. And so that crazy flying geese, that solids, crazy flying geese back there, it's all solids. Did you see it? That's what was the result. But then I had leftovers, so I made that other one. It's on the, I was gonna bring it up, but it wasn't. It's back there on the flying geese. I had that many leftovers, so I put a lot of background with it and made that one, just so I could use them all up. And then I read more about it and studied and went online and learned more, and I thought, oh, that's what I was doing wrong. So this is what I needed to do. Alana's gonna help me show you what I learned to do, and then she's gonna tell you the real way to do it. She's gonna tell you how to find lengthwise versus crosswise. But the thing to come into the library is you have to have a plan when you come in. You have to prepare your fabric, and I'm gonna show you how I did. So if you prepare your fabric the way they say on it, if you're going to make it, come in, check out the dye, take it home, read it all, cut out your pieces the right size. Is that right? Okay. If I'm lying, she can correct me later. Cut out your pieces the right size according to the dye, get your fabric all ready, and then come in, and it won't take you very long. If you don't do that, you'll wish you had an iron and you wish you'd done all the work, pre-work. So first of all, so when I came into the library that day, I also cut up a bunch of pineapple, but I wanted low volume. So I cut all these low volume pineapples just to be weird, and it is weird because you can't really see the contrast. Somebody said, well, that's not a pineapple, you have to have the contrast. I go, well, I like it, so. Anyway, so I did, and they are kind of pokey. Low volume pineapple is probably what the original intention was supposed to be, but, and then I have a lot of strips left over because I didn't plan. I just have strips. So they'll go in my strip box, I'll make something out of them. So that's what I made first in my futile attempt. And then I decided to do a 2-color block. So I made this one, which is much more pineapple. And this is how you do it. You cut pieces the size it says on the instructions. So if you check out the pineapple guide, it will say cut a piece this size to run through it. Okay.
Guys have a little instruction paper that comes with it, so that really helps you to know how to use the die and then have it. So they don't always have sewing instructions, but usually you're working from a pattern too.
Right. So if you take this off, I will try to show you how to do it. So if you're making the red and white, you put the white one cut to size to cover these blocks. It's not quite right, but we'll fix it. You put a red one cut to size to cover that, and another red to cut to size to cover these two, and another red chunk cut to size to cover this. If you don't cut them the right size, you're going to waste a ton of fabric. And I don't want to waste fabric. So she's going to make sure those are all right.
Do you want me to cut this right now?
Yeah.
Okay.
So is that one on?
Can you tilt it up
Well,
Yeah,
what
they're
kind?
fall off.
Okay.
So they're just like, so the, and
They're
it
kind of
tells
covering
you,
up the
How many layers?
pieces.
You
You
can-
can cut up to 6.
but I think I have 4 here. Because that's how much, this is how much it tells you to do one block,
One
4
block.
of these, so many of these, 1 of these. So it'll tell you to cut 1 block, and to do a red and white, you have to have the white on this, the red on those. So she's gonna show you how smooth it is to cut.
You have to turn it on.
Turn it on, she says, that's the key. Or by itself, it's so covered. A lot of people who have shoulder issues or muscle issues or something, this is the way to go, because, like I'm training the other, like the others.
When you pull it out, just kind of give it a little love and rub it like that. It helps kill the static. And then you don't lift it off. If you slide it off, then your pieces will stay intact. And then you just do
Okay.
this.
Yeah, go ahead. And then I read on the pineapple block, and she can tell me if I'm wrong, that if you leave it on there and then sew it, you can sew it and verify the size that you need next.
So you don't
Or
get
the one
lost
you
on
need,
your
yeah.
pieces. You could just take this to your sewing machine, set it by your machine, and then you would know.
A, and then B, and then C, and D, and they're all marked.
Because underneath there, they're labeled. This is block A,
And this is F.
this is H, so that you don't get lost in.
Because the pineapple's
Patterns. Does
kind
that
of
make
tricky.
sense?
The pineapple's tricky, you wanna
See it?
follow the order. Okay,
But that's that quick, and then they're all super accurate and cut exactly. Your dog ears are cut off.
isn't that amazing?
That will make one whole pineapple?
One block.
whole
Uh-huh.
block, just like the one I have wherever it went.
I mean, yeah, there's a little bit of waste, but the time that you save, in my opinion, is worth
And
every
there's
bit.
not much waste. So it'll make one whole block. So
They call these a block on board when there's one board with all the pieces for one block. They call them bobs. A block on board, so the whole block is on one board,
okay.
as opposed to one die that has just one shape.
And the other one I tried to be the professional to show you is a log cabin. So again, that day when I was cutting with Kaylene, didn't know what I was doing. I just cut a bunch of country pieces into log cabins. And then I went home and I had to say, well, that doesn't work there and that color looks stupid there, but I did it anyway. So I wasn't planned, it didn't plan well. So I made these, might become a table runner or something. And then I decided to get smart and I studied up on it. And then you can make a little one if you only use part of it. So if you cut a piece this size and put it on the cabin. So to make a small log cabin, you cut a piece this size. If you want a big log cabin, you cover the whole thing. But if you want a small one, you cover the first half, which will show you. So this is the line. If you just cut this much, it'll make the small one. If you cut it all, it'll make the big one. So we're gonna show you a small one because I think they're cute.
So you have dark and light fabric?
Dark and light, it doesn't matter, it stays together on this one. Okay.
You try to put it on the grain or against
Yes.
the grain?
She can talk about the grain in a minute, but I'm not.
You try to do lengthwise grain as it goes through the machine, so your
Right.
lengthwise should be running lengthwise of the board if you can. I'll admit, sometimes I'm lazy and I don't always make sure on little pieces.
So she's making another one that will be a 2-color one like this. Cutting another one in 2-color. So that's the extent of my trials. And now she's gonna tell you everything you really need to know about it.
Except, the flying geese corners are wasted. These are the corner wastes. And of course, I'm not gonna waste those. I'm gonna match them and make something really cool out of it. So you just wait and see.
Okay.
Is that all the scrap?
Yeah, this is all the scraps.
If you cut the fabric to size, you don't have that much waste.
And so they'll all go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And you'll
Just better
have
colors.
one long one left that I will put in my string, just the way it works out.
Will that go in that machine over there?
Okay,
Yes.
I'll explain all the
I'm
different
gonna
machines to
leave
you.
and she's gonna tell you everything you need to know now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, give her the microphone.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so I hope everybody can hear okay? All right. Okay, so I'm a studio Accu-quilt studio die cutter 8 years ago, 10 years ago, I don't know, I've had it a long time. And when they first came out, all they had was the regular Go Cutter, and then they had a studio version. So the studio version was bigger, and at the time, I wanted to be able to cut layer cakes, jelly rolls, charm packs, all that kind of stuff my own. So to be able to cut those pre-cut sizes. They did not have this big cutter at the time, so all they had was this medium-sized one. And it's kind of a travel, and it sits on a tabletop, folds down like that, and you just crank the die through. So it's not electric, you just have to roll it through with your hand. It'll work either direction, but I couldn't cut a 10-inch square on this. So right off the bat, I knew that wasn't as big as what I wanted. So I bought the studio die. I didn't bring it because, or studio cutter. It's longer and it's more, it does fold up, but it's so heavy, you would never really take it anywhere. And it does bigger, heavier dies. So I'll show you the difference. So these dies, you can see are like, the Go Cutter uses these plastic dies. They're thinner, they have a little bit of foam on them, usually a 2-color foam so you can see the shapes. This is the size of die that my machine uses. So the studio has, this is just the plastic that goes over the top. This is also a block on board. You can see the metal through the back. They're made for, like the idea behind the studio cutter was to create a cutter that shops could use that are kitting up quilts all the time. Because you can do up to 10 layers of fabric in this machine. And this one you can do 6 layers of fabric at a time. So it's just a little heavier, a little more industrial, but I can do bigger stuff. So of cotton, yes. Flannel and minky, you can do the heavier fabrics on those, but you don't do as many layers. On this one, you don't want to probably do more than about 2 layers of flannel or minky. And 1 of denim. I can do about, what do we do, Kaylene? 4 to 5 layers of denim on this one, probably.
So is
So-
yours bigger than that?
Yes,
And can I just ask,
Yeah.
everybody voted, right?
every vote.
Okay, we're done.
So I will just show you really quick since I got this die out. This is a block on board and like what we were just talking about. So this entire block is this. So you can say, I want to mix 4 or 5 different fabrics. You just cut a piece that's going to be at least a quarter. You want to try to trim look at what the die is that you're going to cut, and then cut a strip or a chunk of fabric that's going to be at least a 1/4 inch bigger around the sides than what you're trying to cover up on the board. And so you can cut a strip or you can cut a chunk. This one's kind of more square. And you'll just, like, I could put 4 or 5 different colors of fabric on this, cut it, and then you're just gonna rearrange the pieces and then sew them all back together again. And on my dies that are all 1 color, or these are 2 colors, I can take a silver Sharpie marker and just draw right on the lines, and sometimes it helps you visually. But these, you don't want to push down. There's very, very sharp blades, so you gotta be really careful. You can cut yourself really easy on these. These are a little easier to handle. These are heavy. So I don't feel like I'm worried about cutting myself on those dies. But the studio cutter, if you ever decide you want to invest in that bigger, heavier duty one, they do have a little plastic converter, if you will. It's just a big chunk of plastic that you lay your Go dies on top of because they're thinner, and it'll raise them up high enough. I can run all the Go dies in my studio cutter, but these are too big to go in these, so they don't go backwards. If that makes any sense. But I'll show you the quilt that I made from this one. So this was a quilt from that one die box. So it was just throw a couple of different kinds of fabric in the thing, chunk it up, sew it back together. It was really fast and simple. So that's kind of that quilt made from that die. And the library has lots and lots of different dies, and the block on board ones are fun because you're after a specific block. You're looking for a log cabin block, or you're looking for a pineapple. So whatever, yeah.
I'm in Idaho Falls.
Uh-huh.
They have these at the library in Idaho Falls. too.
I would be surprised they did it. I don't know any other library besides here that does it.
Yeah, I don't think they do.
They probably don't. But I guess maybe you could talk to them and say, hey, talk to the Shelley Library. They got something going on in there.
Come down here. Do we have to have a membership though? Come use it. Okay.
Now this is the Go Me. It's a kind of a baby travel version. It's a little tiny one like this. So you can only do up to 6-inch die. But you'll notice Kaylene wrote on this, only insert it on this side. There's an arrow on this handle that only turns one direction, so it only cuts going one way. Don't try to feed it in backwards, it doesn't work.
We tried it both ways and we could only get it, so this way.
Yeah, just the narrow ones go through the little baby one. So if you're going to a quilt retreat or something and you had, you could use the little tiny one, but it's quite limited on the size of dies that you can use in that. Okay, my hand out there went. So there's many different kinds of dies that you can use. They're expensive, and it's kind of neat that the library is putting those together. I did quite a bit of investing in my machine, and if anybody lives up in the Sugar City area, you're more welcome to come to my house and use mine. Because the dies, once you invest in them, they're not a consumable product too much. Rag dies, I might retract that a little bit. Just a couple of things in general about the Accu-quilt cutters. They are 90% faster than trying to cut it on your own. They are accurate cuts every single time. So that's kind of, if you're doing a lot of piecing, if you can get your cutting accurate, it'll pay big dividends on the other end when you're trying to get all your seams matching up. Sometimes people that have a really hard time doing good piecing, half the battle is it doesn't cut right to start with. So that helps. They're safe, they're easy to use. You can do up to 6 layers of cotton at a time. And they have, in all their dies, all the 1/4-inch seams are built into it. So like if it's cutting you the 2 pieces of a half square triangle, it already has the seam allowance figured in, and all the dog ears are already cut off. So that is super nice. So you don't have to worry about going back and trimming all that stuff up. But yes, always try to cut on the lengthwise grain. So you want your lengthwise grain running through the machine this way. So if you got a big long die, you want to try to cut your strips so your lengthwise grain's going through there. And then you always, of course, have to have a cutting mat on top. These are just kind of a little rubbery soft. The other ones I use are more of an acrylic. But that helps the die press up in, the blades press up in, smash the fabric into that, and it helps cut. So it trims pretty good. Every once in a while you'll get a little, if you're coming to the library, bring a little tiny pair of scissors with you, because every once in a while there'll be a thread or two that doesn't quite, you go pull it apart, you'll be stuck with a little thread. That's kind of just normal. Just grab your little teeny scissors and cut that. So kind of went through all the different kind of cutters. Oh yeah, go ahead. Do the dies wear out? Some of them do. Well, let me just talk about rag quilts for a minute since you're asking about that. I know the library has a rag die. I made one rag quilt and cut this fringe off by hand with a pair of scissors, but I have really bad arthritis in my hands, and I was like, I will never make another rag quilt as long as I live. This die will actually cut all the fringe at the exact same time. So when you cut it, it cuts a 3/4-inch fringe, so you just lay them down and you sew it a 1-inch seam, and so you're a 1/4 inch past the fringe, and it's wonderful. Because they're kind of quilt as you go when you make those, if you know about those rag quilts. They're simple, they're fun, and you don't spend hours and hours cutting. So this is my rag quilt that I made, and I have 2 shapes, the 2 dies that I brought. This is kind of hard to see. This is actually a rag star and a rag heart that you can applicate on, and this one, you can see it because it has fabric stuck in it. This one is a flower and a circle. So I used those with this. I wanted a really heavy worm. My boys were playing baseball. I needed a baseball blanket that in Idaho I could wrap up in and not freeze to death. So this was my rag quilt that I made. So I did a denim rag flower and just kind of appliqued those on the flannel blocks in between. Really fast and easy. So it's and then the backs are all just flannel.
But those are two different sizes.
Yes, and so they have different, I have the big rag die that does a great big square, and then this is a 4-patch that equals the big square. So the big square, I cut the flannel out, use the smaller one to do the 4-patch, actually have a rag rectangle as well too. So you can do different settings of it. But that was my rag quilt, so I would have never done that in a million years with scissors.
How come the rag is green and not denim?
It's
From
green
the
flannel
back.
because you're cutting flannel from the back and the denim at the same time. So in
Oh,
the
back
seam,
comes up.
the back is coming up in the
So
seam
when
too.
you're done, you're done.
You're done. Yep, you sew your pieces together and just, and then you just X across each block and that quilts it together.
Lining.
Direct batting.
This one I did not do batting, but you can.
So what?
Because I was doing denim and flannel, I didn't put batting in
Does
it.
it cut the batting too?
You can, yeah, you can get, they have the die that is the right size, if you look on their website. You can get the die that cuts just the square, that's just the square batting that goes inside with no fringe. Okay, so those are two of my favorite. So rag quilts, the rag quilts dies because so much threads gets mashed down into that. You have to kind of pick the threads out after you're done. And that's the one die, I haven't worn mine out yet, but that would be the one die, if anything I have in my set wears out, that will be the one.
We've replaced this one the most.
Yeah, the library's replaced the rag die one the most. Yeah, the plastic covers on the back.
These.
The back, the tops, yes, you do have to replace your mats. The cutting mats, after a while, if you're having a hard time getting it to cut, a lot of times it's because you need a new mat. But you can cut on both sides of that mat, back and forth and back and forth, and you've just completely worn out the tops and the bottoms of them. It's best to choose a mat that fits approximately the same size of the die that you're running through it. If you get a really oversized mat, a little tiny die, the mat can be a little wobbly as it goes through the cutter. And sometimes that can affect its ability to make a clean cut. So it's not an absolutely have to, but it's better than if you have something that there's a mat that matches that die size. That makes sense. Okay, so I wanted to tell you a little bit about their cube system. Now this is new. They didn't have these when I bought it. They didn't have the big go cutter. If I were to buy it today, I probably would just get a big electric because it's wide enough throat now that you can do 10-inch squares. You can do some of the bigger stuff. But these are kind of fun. And I didn't know a whole lot until I started prepping for this class because I don't have these cubes because I already, in the past 8 years, I bought a lot of dies. So I thought, do I really need all these shapes on top of everything else I already have? So I wanted to explain this cube system. They have, in these mix and match cube systems, they have a 4-inch, a 5-inch, a 6-inch, an 8-inch, a 9, 10, and 12-inch cube. This is called a cube. And the library has them all. Right?
I don't have the 4 and 5.
4 and 5. 5 is a brand new size.
6, 8.
6, 8,
6 and up.
6 and up. Okay. So they're available. And this is a really interesting, once I learned how to use this, it's kind of fun. If you pull the little one out, I'll just kind of demo how they work. You pull the little one out first, and inside here is your mat. Cute little mat there. There is video, there's instructions in it, there's a DVD. So there's a lot of information about that. That's your basic part. And then this one is labeled, oops, right here, 1 to 4. So every cube, so there's the 6-inch, this is the 8-inch. So the pieces in this box will make an 8-inch finished block. You're not gonna get the 8-inch cube and cut an 8-inch square. You gotta do some sewing. So these are the pieces that make up an 8-inch block. So if you start looking at patterns, you'll start to learn the grid system and you can break down a pattern and figure out which pieces would work for what you're trying to do if you're trying to go from a pattern. Now this folds out like this. So this is block number 1, 2, 3, and 4. So every pocket is labeled, every die is labeled. Inside here, I can put angle this while I'm standing here. So be my Vanna White.
I'll be your fan of white.
So in each pocket, there's a little card. It kind of gives you an idea for a block. So you can kind of see there's some block ideas within the box. And then I'm gonna pull this out. Okay, this is die number 1. It'll say on the back. And it's on a 4-patch system. Block number 1 is just a large square. And this is hard to see on here, but there's actually 4 of these. So 4 in a 4-patch system, 4 blocks sewn together This is, what am I pulling this out, the 8-inch?
The 8-inch.
Yeah, so 4 number ones pulled out should equal an 8-inch square. And let me see, I've used, I'll find my actual fabric pieces here. That's okay. We have a lot of stuff going on in this paper here. I used the bigger, I think a 10-inch block to cut it out. So here we have our number ones. So number ones can be sewn together like, or patch. So you can just do that, and that would give you a 10-inch block. Since I'm showing you the 8, but I cut the pieces out of the 10 just so they're bigger. So there's your number one. And once you learn the numbers and what they are, they're the exact same shape in every single cube. It's just going to give you a different outcome size. So the number one die in every cube set is going to be the large square. Does that make sense? Okay, so they're all numbered. There's 8 different shapes. Let's see what else I'm afraid to tell you. Okay, so here's my little diagram. So that's number one. Number 2 is a smaller square. So number 2 has these small squares. And when you sew those together, 4 of these number 2s equals the same size as 1 of the number 1s. So all these little pieces are all going to build together, and every single one of these numbers will build to make 1 of the number 1 squares. So you'll start to see how you can mix and match.
I think we had them mixed up.
Oh, that's the number.
This one's the number 1.
There's the number
that's
1. This is the
2.
number 2. They were in the wrong pocket.
They're
Sorry.
in the wrong pocket. I'm going, wait.
Yeah, number 1 should be a solid square. Number 2 is the 4 patch.
I have
Okay.
a question.
Yeah.
On that, the die she's holding up,
Uh-huh.
the square one,
Mhm.
just number 1.
Right.
I found that trying to get your grain, the grain line on that square, it's kind of.
Don't line your fabric up with the die. Line your fabric up with the square. Now, the square sits on the die slightly skewed for a reason, because as it goes through the rollers, it'll make a cleaner cut than if it's going straight on at a 90-degree angle as it hits the rollers. If it's slightly off, that's how scissors work. They're kind of at an angle from each other. So by tilting them on the die just a little bit as they go through, you tend to run the die through straight. This is how we are. So they're tilted on the die just a little bit. So just tilt your fabric and line up your strip. So if you can just look at your fabric or your die that you're trying to cut a strip of fabric that's about a 1/4 inch bigger on either side, and just kind of line that up with that and then send it through. And it'll
line
go
it up with the outside.
with the actual shape of what you're cutting instead of the outside edge of the die. Because yeah, it'll skew your line and grain. Thank you. Appreciate that clarification. Okay, so the next piece in the block is, or in the box, is a number 3. And 3 is your half square triangle, right? So 2 of these number 3s, and you see how that's going to equal 1 of your number 1s. Okay, so there's the number 3 die. Number 4 is a 1/4 square triangle. If I can get these to lay here, right. Sometimes people will look at this number 4 die and assume it is half square triangles. Now, could you take this and sew it to this and make a half square triangle? Yes, it won't be cut. Your bias will be off and your grain line will be off. But this will change the size of a half square triangle that won't fit into this 4-patch grid system either. So yes, you could, but the sizing won't interchange with the rest of the blocks. So try to remember these are specifically set up for your grain line. What am I trying to say? Anyway, so that your grain of your fabric goes the right direction to sew a 1/4 square triangle. So 4 of these is going to again equal your number 1 block size-wise. Am I losing anybody, or are you following me okay? Okay, then we go to number 5. Number 5 is kind of our workhorse. Number 5 is a small half square triangle. gosh, this funnel board is not super,
Not sticking.
well, but it's wavy. It's like the board is wavy. Okay, these aren't fabulously sticking, but you get the general idea. So 8 of these is going to equal your number 1. And if you can sew those together, you can put them in a pinwheel, you can rearrange those however you want, but that is also going to equal a number 1. Now 6 is also a square, but this guy is meant to live on point. So 6 is your square in a square. This is the square part of the square in a square block. So what do you think we're going to use on the sides? We'll use more number 5s. So if you cut some more of these number 5 guys, then pretty soon you have a square living in a square. That makes sense? And again, this with your 5s equals a number 1. Okay, the next shape is shape number 7. And shape number 7 is little parallelograms. And again, we use our workhorse number 5 for our corners, which then creates a rectangle.
You're 7 in the red on top, let's go the other way,
Okay.
long side, not short.
No, that's not kind of, just with the seam allowance is off a little bit. Okay.
That's according to our picture.
You can cut it however you want.
Well, you can angle them however you want. You could, it just depends. So 7 is directional. So what I'm going to tell you is these were both cut with the fabric going up. So the parallelograms are running the same direction. If you want opposing, then you fan fold your fabric. So then you get some going one way, some going the other direction. So we'll pretend like this was cut the other direction. And then these are going to go that way. So it kind of depends on your pattern. You want to look at which way you want your slant to go, if that makes sense. And so if you have 2 sets of those, that's going to equal, 2 sets of these will equal a number 1. And then our last block in the box is number 8. And number 8 is a rectangle. And if you look at these, this also makes a rectangle. So when that's sewn together, you could have a rectangle on the bottom and you could have this parallelogram on the top. But 2 of these number 8s is going to make the number 1. Now every cube works exactly the same way, if that makes any sense. So you can look at a pattern and you can look at a block and the possibilities start to get really crazy. In one cube, if you look at the very last page of your handout, shows 72 different block patterns. You can actually, on their website, download this little booklet, and they have an actual pattern for every single one of those blocks. So it makes an enormous PDF, which you could download and get any of those blocks that you want. So you can make 72 different blocks with just those few dies right there in millions of different combinations to make those blocks. So it's a pretty powerful little system. And if you want to combine, if you think of everything kind of as a grid, if you want to combine cubes, you can if they're doubled. So like the 5-inch cube and the 10-inch cube, you could put them together, but you just use like 2 5s to equal a 1. Does that make sense? Is anybody there? Or you can go from the 6-inch cube and the 12-inch cube could match, because you would just double whatever was on the 6 to equal 1/4 of a block of the 12. So you can kind of mix and match the sizes that way. Then they have 2 more boxes, and I don't know, do the library have the companion sets that go with these yet or no? Okay, so if you're looking at buying anything online, I didn't do pieces for you on the board with this, but they have a corner set and an angle set. And if you get the corner and the angle set, the amount of blocks possible from these combinations go from 72 with a box to 216 blocks with the 2 add-on sets. Each of those add-on sets, one's called corners, one's called angles, and they each just have 4 dies in them. So they move on and go, to shape number 9. In the corners is a chisel, so you have a piece like this and an angle, and you can do chisel blocks. Number 10 is a signature block, which on your handout is this one right here. So it has a stripe and then 2 number 5s on the corners, makes the signature block. And then they have a snowball block where you do 1 square and snowball the corners. And they have the little tiny square triangle pieces that go on those corners. And then in the angles box, you have an isosceles triangle that helps you do a triangle in a square block. And then those side arms also work on this kite block. And then they have this trapezoid shape. So there's a lot of options as far as how those cubes work. But I was really fascinated to see how they all interchange. And once I understood the interchange, you can then go to a block pattern and look at so you have a block pattern that you want to look at. If you can break it down into a grid and figure out, okay, this corner, maybe it's a 4-patch block. This corner 4-patch right here is a certain size. Then you can look at your cubes and figure out what 4 of those are finished, and that'll tell you which blocks to go to, and then you can break down your pattern from there. So any questions so far? There's none. Okay. I don't have a ton of time, but the other thing I wanted to show you is the strips. One of the things I use the most is my strip dies. So these cut strips. They have some other angles marked on here, and I'll show you those in a second. But I have 1.5 inch strips, 2 inch, 2.5. Like I have lots of strips, and I use them for borders. I even have a big 6 inch wide strip. I can cut border strips with that. So I probably use my strip boards more than I use shapes. They have tons of applique shapes too. So if you don't want to cut out applique, on applique shapes, you can iron on your fusible. If you're going to do like a fusible applique, you can iron on your fusible ironing on first, and then run your shape through the cutter, and it'll cut them both at the same time. So that's really fun, and get really fun shapes, birds, and they have tree houses and stars and a million flower petals, and there's tons and tons of applique shapes. The one, go ahead.
Do they have a 3-inch strip cutter?
Yes. Yep. And another thing, if you want to do a lot of squares, so if these cut this is a 2.5 inch board, so you can cut a whole bunch of 2.5 inch strips like this, then you can lay your strips this way across the blades and then run it through, and then all of a sudden you have a whole bunch of 2.5 squares done. Does that make sense? Because you cut them this way and then you cut them the other direction. Yeah.
That, what do you call it? That makes the strips that way.
Yeah, this one does.
Because I'm seeing the angles.
Yeah, you can see these dark lines. These are just like marking lines to do diamonds. This is these little cracks right here are the blades. So this will cut 1, 2, 3, 2.5 inch strips between. So the way that these are is if you cut a 2.5 inch strip and then you take your strip and you lay it along this, say this 60 line right here and line it up, and then you run it back through again, it'll cut perfect 60-degree triangles. So that's what those are, to lay them out, to just cut different angled shapes is kind of what they put those marks on the board for. Or this is of course a 90-degree if you wanted to cut a square. Probably, and the one quilt I probably should have brought more than any of the ones I did bring. I didn't realize until I got here that I left at home. But one quilt I did was circles. So I had a layer cake here with a circle in the middle and a 4-patch with a circle in the middle of each 4-patch, and then another big circle. And I never in a million years would have appliqued millions of circles that I had to cut out by hand, because circles are so hard to cut by hand. So I did all of those, and again, I used my fusible stuff on the back, ironed them on, whipped them through, pulled off the edges, and then just ironed all the circles on and appliqued around. It was really fast and easy. So circles are a fabulous use of this tool. Like not everything you want to cut out do I use my cutter for, but you have a circle die there too, don't you?
This one we just got. So it has
Lots of different sizes of circles.
1/2, 3/4, 1 and 1 1/4.
So if you want to cut a bunch of circles for applique or whatever you want to do, those are fantastic. You don't have to sit. Cut
Wool
with
applique,
scissors.
we thought wool applique.
Yeah, that would be good for wool applique.
And then We have this one.
Oh, so they do have the big circles. So circles is, oh man, use the cutter for circles. They're so fast and easy.
Those will only go through this.
The big ones, yeah. And I think I wrote on there which cutters can accept what size of dies on the handout thing there too. I'll just show you some of these other quilts really quick. This one, I used the cutter to cut all the little strips for the flags. Oops, that's upside down. I was trying to find a few quilts with examples that would show you a good use of the cutter. And I didn't use it so much for all the little pieced corners of the flags, but so many strips and then they're all exactly the same width, especially on small things. So that one was a fun quilt to do that with. And this quilt I probably never would have done in a million years because as a twin size, I had to cut 540 3-inch squares. So I bought a die that has like 23-inch squares on it. So one pass, at 10 layers of fabric, I've got 200 squares and one whip through my machine. So three passes through my machine and I had all my squares cut because every single one has a square on the corner and flipped back. So this one's called a zap quilt. It was kind of fun to do. But again, that made it super fast and easy to be able to cut lots and lots of little squares.
Did you make your squares into half square triangles?
No, I cut them I sewed a square right here diagonally and folded it back and cut the back off. So just kind of a sew flip method. And is there anybody that loves scraps that didn't get a bag of scraps? I have a whole bunch of scraps from that quilt that I'm never going to make another one from. Anyone? There you go. Merry Christmas. Okay, and the one last thing I want to show you really quick is how you can use these strip dies to cut bias binding. Let me pull this up here. Just do that and then it's done. Okay, so this is a really cool trick. You take a piece of fabric, 18 inches wide with the fabric. And let's see if I can figure out how I did it. I did it ahead of time with iron creases, so I'll see if I can hold this board steady for me, Kaylene. Okay, the first thing we're gonna do is find our 45-degree mark. So we're gonna fold down this side like that. That's gonna give us our bias angle. And on this side, you fold it up like this. Okay. I didn't attempt to show you on the board. We're gonna take, let's do it this way. We're gonna fold these two, so our folded edges, so our folded edges are at the top of the die. I'm gonna lay the die underneath, but I would lay this on my die. So I have this folded edge here. I'm gonna fold this up until this folded edge meets, like so. I'm gonna stay there sort of kind of. And then you're gonna lay it on your die so that you're just a little bit above and below those blade lines. And then you're gonna fold this back over on this side like an envelope. So this fold goes to the top. Yep.
To the top or the bottom?
Should go to the top. That's the wrong way. Yep. Just like that. So can you kind of see over my head? So it's like an envelope. You just need to make sure when you do this that there's no part of the die that's going to end up with more than 6 layers in it when you do it. But I think you're okay here. And you want to make sure that your blade lines are sticking out past on either end of that because you want a continuous cut. You don't want to have the cut stop like right here. So you want the blades to keep cutting past each end. So I'm going to kind of reposition this and show you how this works. It's a little hard to hold it up straight up and down. Hopefully you can see well enough to understand. On there.
What's that machine called again? Motorized one?
This one's called the Go Big. the electric ones. And the other one works the same way, you're just gonna hand crank it through. It's not too hard to turn. Smooth it off, and then again, slide your off like that. And then it's best to peel off your outside edges, your trim pieces that are extra, so you don't get them mixed up because they're not the right size. This is a 2.5-inch die. So here is all your 2.5-inch bias binding chunks cut. And just like you do any other method of cut and bias binding, you're gonna have various different lengths of strips, if that makes sense, but you have all these little pieces and all your biases cut that fast. So it's just, yeah, go ahead.
You said that was 18 wide?
18 wide, just with the fabric.
Okay.
Yep. And then I'll just show you real quick. So here's your 2.5-inch strip, even though this is biased. I'll show you like if you're gonna cut the diamond. So if I'm gonna lay this on that 60 degree line. Just for fun, and I'll show you how that works. So I'm just lining my strip up on the die like that with that 60 degree angle line. And we'll just run it through real quick and I'll show you how it cross cuts those. We can do this one just first. I'll show you.
So that one hanging over the edge of the that's okay.
It'll just be scrapped, so it doesn't matter, yeah. As long as it's not so far over, it's binding up in the edges of the machine. But I often have fabric hanging over the edge. See, and then you have these perfectly cut diamonds from laying it on the board at an angle. Or I laid this one at a 90 degree angle, and then you have squares. Now, so you can see I folded it up to bring it in my bag today. You probably want to iron your fabric really good before you cut. Just so that you don't have your folds and all that stuff in it. Anyway, so that's just another way you can use the strip dies to do bias binding, or you can cut different angled triangles or diamonds or squares. So that's kind of fun for your strip on the strip dies. And this one pattern. Any other questions? Yeah, go ahead. I do. I live in Sugar City. Absolutely. Come over, hang out in my sewing studio and use my cutter anytime you want. But it's good to, like you said, plan your fabric, figure out what you want. If you have questions, I have lots and lots of dies. I don't have the cubes, but I have a lot of shapes. I used to have a Word document that I put all of the actual dies that I had and what shapes of squares and sizes. It's not updated anymore because I bought more stuff. So I should update that. But if you have any questions, give me a call. Definitely have all the strip sizes. I have all the rag dies. I have several. I have Lemoyne star blocks. I
use
Log cabins.
tumblers.
I have tumbler dies. Those are really easy to cut out a whole bunch of tumblers. So my phone number is 208-351-7301. Alana Lurwell, if you want to call, and you're welcome to come to my house or use my cutter.
7301.
Yeah, 208-351-7301. It's my cell phone. So
And it's Alana.
Alana Lurwell. Any other questions about how to use it? Has anybody else ever used the library cutter here yet? It's here. Oh, you have a sort.
Does the library have the angles fixed?
They don't have the angles and corners yet, she said. Just the cubes, but they have most of the sizes of the cubes. I don't know what other dies like she brought up here to show. There's lots of books too that Accu-quilt puts out. And if you want to learn more about their stuff, they have a blog. If you go to blog.accuquilt.com, there's tons of like learning and tips and tutorials and tricks, and they have lots and lots of block ideas.
This one goes with the cube.
Yeah, those are Go Cube patterns. These are just random patterns, you know. Here's like one that has applique, must be. Oh, I have a die for mine that cuts picot borders all in a string. So if you want to put picot borders in a quilt and those little triangles, you just cut it and fold it and just sew the whole strip right into the quilt. They're all evenly spaced. So that one's kind of a fun one. Yeah, 208 351 7301. Here's a picture of like an applique where they've done applique flowers that you can cut out and put on a quilt. So that's kind of another idea. There's lots of fun, they have lots of flowers and seasonal stuff like reindeer and Christmas trees and stars. So there's lots of
English paper.
snowflake. Yes, they have English paper piecing dies if you want to do hexagons. You do a lot of hexie cutting. You can cut hexagons on it.
Remember the flower I
So
put
this
in
is a
mine?
strip. I just
Because I hated the orange so bad.
They have
Fixed it,
flying
just
geese,
quilted
that's, we
over
talked
it.
about that one, there's the die for the flying geese. Oh, these are all the libraries.
Can you imagine?
This is a carpenter wheel die, so there's that one. And those are, oh, you showed one over there.
over here. They have one that cuts a double wedding.
Oh, yes, they have the double wedding ring, if you wanna cut those, so it'll cut all those little segments of the double wedding rings. Well, they do have that die too. Oh, is that one up here? Oh, okay, there's another pile I didn't get to. So here's one with lots of squares in one. Oh, here it is. There's the double wedding ring.
They have it in two sizes.
There's two dies in here, so maybe that's what it is.
No, it's bigger than.
Is it bigger than that one too?
Bigger one.
So you put a different color on, if you want it different color to different.
Yeah, and the instructions usually tell you a little bit how to prep your fabric, depending on what you wanna do. So it might be not hurt to just come to the library first, do a little excursion, look at the dies, figure out what you wanna do, see if anything that they have fits a quilt that you're working on, or a quilt that you wanna do like this. And then maybe look at the instructions and see how to prep your fabric, and then you're gonna wanna sew it, cut it, now you check out the handheld ones, right?
We check out the handheld ones.
So these smaller fold-up ones, you can check the actual cutter and take it home and use it at home. If you wanna use the bigger dies or the quicker electric ones without having to have the cranker on it, you'd have to plan a little better and iron your fabric to read them.
I got one of those.
The
My
little one?
husband, no,
This,
yeah, and my husband got all excited and he went on eBay and he got me some cutters. So watch out for old cutters. They're made out of wood and they warp and they rust.
yeah, I would agree.
So watch out for your husband.
You try, right?
It's a machine, it's gonna
It's a machine, I like that, right? I'm investing in a machine. Any other questions or?
What was the big studio?
It's called the Studio 2 now. They have a second version of it, but, so the Studio one is the great big, more industrial one that they made, kind of designed for quilt shops.
Janice just told me that she has one, but she doesn't really have a place for it and she would love to sell it
Okay, there you
with
go.
all her
Somebody
dyes.
wants to buy
So
one.
it's a good deal. She said it's $1,500, but that's the thing and all her dyes, and so they're really.
The dies are
expensive.
$200 or $300 a piece sometimes, and
So,
they're really big, complicated
It might,
dies.
if
but
you're interested, maybe with.
Talking to Jonas in the back, okay. That's good. No, yeah. Any other questions? Okay, I think we're done.
Thank you.
Thank you.